The bear grabbed Morgan by her feeble little ankle, began dragging her away from her postal vehicle as her little fingernails dug into the dirt. She would scream like a wounded bunny. The pepper spray already failed. The bear's massive skull was engulfed in the red pepper mace, just oozing off of his face as he dragged the young female into the dense forest. What happened after that was insane. I almost don't want to tell you guys about it, but these stories are important to hear. As many of you know, we need perspective, we need insight, and when it comes to bear attacks, we need to be aware. The bear began digging into Morgan's abdomen as her soul began to leave her. What's up, guys and gals? Iceman here. Welcome to Chilling Tales. So this one happened to a post office worker in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. This story is just insane. This young, beautiful, vibrant woman by the name of Morgan. She had this olive skin, these nice brown, hazelish, beady eyes. Beautiful, long, reddish hair that she would dye. Just slightly red. A little brown, but she made it red. Chick was 27 years of age when this attack took place. Now, Morgan was an unusual soul. She had a lot of boyfriends growing up. Not gonna lie. She had bipolar disorder. Okay? Now, not talking crap, I'm just saying, these videos, I state the facts, you know? And to my understanding, with some mental conditions like that, it's sort of hard to be content. And you go through swings like a pendulum. Boom, you're swinging this way over 6 months, then you're swinging this way, then you get sick of your boyfriend, then you find another one, you know? And it's just the process continues. Point being is Morgan had to find a way to self-sustain. She couldn't really rely on a man, right? When you pretty much have it embedded in your nature to dump his ass every 6 months. And then find another one. You know what I'm saying? So you have to be self-motivated, self-driven, and that's kind of what she was. Fortunately, she didn't go into debt. In college, she skipped college. She lived with a boyfriend for 6 months, took off, this and that. Lived with her mom, who's divorced, adding to her instability in the way of her relationships. But nonetheless, she had to make money and she wanted to get involved in it without putting out much money, so she started working for the Postal Service. Paid her pretty good. Had herself a little trailer in northern Michigan. And that's where the bear found her. So her route consisted of all these houses that were far apart. You know, the Postal Service, even if you live out in the boonies or whatever, if your house is registered or whatnot and you have a mailbox, they gotta go out there, okay? Sometimes there are these long, winding driveways, like the mailbox is at the end, and they're the long, winding driveway, then the house. And Morgan often delivered mail to these houses. Now, considering her route, she was a bit of an introvert, which I think is why she selected these routes that are out in the woods. She can get a taste of nature, she can work later in the evening, and so forth. Now, this attack took place in October. All right, in this part of Michigan, it was getting dark around 6:30 p.m. Sometimes she was still out on her routes. And there was this one customer in particular who had a bunch of packages that they wanted the USPS worker to pick up. Okay? So Morgan, her little postal car couldn't go down the driveway. The driveway, often they were dirt and they were packed, they were winding. And so some of the customers or people who lived up north, they just had big old pickup trucks or 4Runners that were capable of going through this sort of terrain. All right? And Morgan didn't mind getting her steps in. So this one customer in particular who had a bunch of boxes they scheduled on the website for the postal worker to pick up that day, Morgan hit that house last. And it was getting dark. She pulls her little vehicle up, shuts it off, takes the key out, puts a little bit of mail in the mailbox, and then starts making her way down this dark, twisted driveway in the night. These beautiful pine spruce trees as tall as the eye could see, just covering most of the sky. The faint light that's left of the sun just barely coming through the trees. No pun intended. Barely. This poor girl. Wanna know what she had on her? Means of protection? Pepper spray. Not the kind, mind you, that's made for bears, which is very strong. Goes a long way, this is a very thick stream. No, this is the kind that's made for human predators, all right? She would carry this with her often. Like I said, she was a beautiful young woman, and she had many occurrences of guys who would objectify her, right? Oh, I span it shouldn't have anything to do with whether or not guys go after her if she's beautiful. That's no reason. And, you know, girls has the right to be beautiful. Well, that's true, but remember, guys objectify women all the time or whatever, you know? So if you're a certain standard that doesn't supposed to exist, you might attract some baddies. I mean, I'm just giving you guys the facts here. Okay? Morgan had a couple encounters with guys who were bad guys. That's why she carried the damn spray. Do I gotta say any more? So she had the spray. She started walking down this path in her little shorts. She had mosquito repellent all over her. Nice soft skin, the sun just sort of bouncing off her reflective skin. And she heard something. Shuffling in the thicket. She stopped. Took a look. Hello? Hello? Prepared her pepper spray. Then turned and continued walking toward the house. Now, Morgan had a love for animals. So she was maybe a bit undercautious when it came to bears. She saw a few of them during her postal routes, but never this close. She gets to the house. She grabs the big crate that the customer left out, one of those USPS bins, and it's just full of packages. This person's a seller or something. They sell stuff. She heaves up this heavy bin, weighs about 30 pounds, holds it close to her body, and starts walking back down the path. And the night's getting darker. You can hear the faint sounds of the crickets and the bugs. And she can't help but notice a foul smell in the air. It smelled of dead fish, rotting flesh, and urine. She kept walking. The customer's house seemed to be vacant. They had the porch light on, they had the packages out, but it didn't really seem like anyone was home. It didn't even cross Morgan's mind to turn back if she sensed danger. She just wanted to get back to her vehicle. So, What happened from there, as she began approaching her vehicle, she heard a sound. A sort of moan and snort like a pig. She dropped the bin of packages. They spilled all over the ground. Hello? Get out of here, is what she said. Stay away! And nothing. She thought it was a perpetrator, a human perpetrator. She scrambled to the ground and began picking up the packages, putting them back into the bin. A lot of them she had to brush the dirt off. And she smelled that smell once again, a heinous gust of hell. She scrambled back to her vehicle, made her way around toward the back, and shoved the packages in, and then slammed the gate. You know, had one of those little slide down gates? She slammed the gate. And that sound startled the bear. As soon as she did that, the bear was just around the other side of the vehicle. It bolted around when the door slammed and smacked her to the ground. It stood up. Boom! Right across her arm, shoulder, and face, leaving a massive gash up her neck and cheek. The blood looked black in the moonlight, and she fell to the ground, holding herself in the fetal position, knowing something awful was about to happen. She readied her pepper spray. She fell to the ground and scrambled for her spray, and she had to figure out which way it goes, because it only, it goes a certain way. It was a weird one with a little tab, like this one has a little thumb tab. You have to set the thumb tab straight like that and then push down. All right, so she was trying to push down. She didn't know which way to turn it, so she was looking at it, trying to figure it out. And then that's when the bear stood atop her. And as soon as it did that, it used its forepaws to sort of press down on her chest. She was laying on her side like this, and it pressed down on her chest like this. And that's when Morgan scrambled for the spray and sprayed it. And it sprayed all over her face. She began coughing and sneezing and gagging. And the bear bolted off of her and started sneezing and huffing. Bear started puffing and huffing. And Morgan lay there desolate with spray all over her face and a red cloud surrounding the area. The bear huffed and puffed some more and looked back at the young, feeble woman. Morgan couldn't see. She was blind. And blood all over her face, and she looked at her hand. Beautiful girl. Concerns of disfigurement began to emerge in her mind. How would a man ever find her attractive again? That's the least of her concerns at this moment, however. She started dragging herself around the same side the bear came from to the driver's side of her little postal vehicle. The bear lurched around and attacked her again. I don't know if it had cubs in the area or what, but this bear was adamant on bringing an end to this young woman. Morgan no longer had the pepper spray. She left it behind as she drug herself. She just began dragging herself over to the door of the postal vehicle. The bear circled around, saw her, and grabbed her little ankle, and just started dragging her away from the postal vehicle. So she couldn't get back to her vehicle, and she was just being drug away. All right. Absolutely heinous. Now, what happened after that, I don't know. I mean, it is so disgusting. The bear started digging a hole in this young woman when she was still alive. Okay? And it had these massive, yellow, bacteria-ridden claws and these sharp fangs. And it just, this hulking body. Oh, and it started digging into her, just pulling her flesh apart. And she would try to cover herself. Her face was just drenched in blood and red mace. And the bear, its snout had the red mace all over it. Its eyes were just watery and bloodshot red. It would get in her face and just growl and hiss. It stood atop her and collapsed on her. Like this, like boom, it put its forearms on her and just started trying to crush her. Just knocking the wind out of her. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't take in another breath. It was so heavy atop her chest. I almost don't want to tell you guys this story, but like I said, it's important to be bear aware. The bear kept digging into her center of mass, just right around kind of by the breast. And the breast had some chub to it, it was a little fat. And the bear ripped through her little postal outfit. She had like this button-up blue shirt, then a little tank top under there. The bear just ripped through it and chomped down on her breast. And I think that's why it went in a feeding frenzy. The breast, it had some to it, a little bit of fat, a little bit of muscle, a little bit of heft, a little bit of firmness. So she, Morgan, she kept herself well. She drank a lot of milk. She was active, had a pretty good diet. So the bear ate that. And I think it caused it to go into a feeding frenzy. And Morgan was bleeding to death at this point. So, after it ate some of her breast, it ripped through the shirt and just it would raise its head up and just chew and chew and chew, and this blood just oozing down its mouth. And Morgan's body just lay there like this, just desolate, just stunned, nearly in a state of paralysis, perhaps paralysis of fear. Or perhaps paralysis of the physical endeavor she was partaking in. But the bear didn't stop there. After it got a good taste of her, it began digging into her center cavity right here, just digging and digging and digging, like it was looking for something, like an organ or something, but it just kept going through her center, and it ripped through some of her heart and lung. And she was dead at this point. Her body lay there desolate, her corpse motionless. And the bear dug through her through and through. It dug a massive hole into her chest cavity. It started with just a big gnawing out of her breast, but it dug a hole here all the way through her body, exposing some of her lungs, her heart, her rib cage. It ripped out some of her ribs and chewed on them. But it dug all the way to the dirt. All right? And it chewed on some of her ribs like a dog chews on bones. And then it stood atop, like it just ate, and just blood oozing down its mouth and human organs and so forth. It was on all fours on top of her, and then it just sat there for a minute, just chewing and chewing and chewing. And then it stood over her again. Like how a tarantula stands over a mouse fetus, just contemplating what to do to it next. Do I continue mutilating this thing, or am I just too full at this point? Should I just leave it as it is? But the bear left. And as was standard, Morgan never reported back into work that night. She never clocked out. And her vehicle was still gone. Wasn't until the next morning they started sending out a group to find her. The police were called. They didn't know where the hell she was. The customer never came home the following day, so there was no one there to see this mess. All right, there was just a postal vehicle down this old dirt road that barely anyone would go down. They finally started going down her route, and the following morning sometime, they found the vehicle, and they found the corpse of Morgan about 10 feet away from the vehicle. Just her body just sprawled out like this, just the look of death in her eyes. Just, it was like, it was a soulless look in her eyes, and her mouth open, a big gash across her face, and just the massive hole in her chest. She was just, her back was to the ground. And there's this huge hole in her center of mass. Her clothes ripped off, and around the attack scene, it just looked like a rototiller went through it. It was just so horrifying. And she had this pepper spray all over her face and all over the ground. The investigators had to put cloths over their face because the scene was still just engulfed in pepper spray. All over the vehicle, the side of the vehicle, all over the ground. They ended up finding that damn bear. They called the Rangers. The Rangers were there investigating, and the bear came back for its cash. And they saw this hulking bear with blood all over its face and a big spot of pepper spray all over it. They saw it coming up to him, just sort of bluff charge him a little bit, and then it go back into the woods, to go back into the woods. And that's when they took it down. About a 350-pound Bruin. About 10 years old, a bit old for a bear. But not that old. The thing was hungry. Yeah, that neighborhood in the Upper Peninsula. Terror struck throughout this nightmarish story. The people there were in peril and still are. Just what a massacre that was. It's just hard to imagine that a bear could do such a thing, but that's just it. And these are wild animals. The black bear should not be underestimated. But let me know in the comments, what would you do in that situation? I mean, maybe she should have had a better means of protection. I don't know. Maybe a flashlight. Maybe a hand cannon, you know? Maybe bear spray. But these things are, you know, you got to be aware. What would you do in that situation? What could have been done differently to save little Morgan's life? Let me know in the comments below your thoughts on these matters, and I'll see you all tomorrow with more chilling tales from the Iceman.